She constantly left one-on-ones with her manager feeling deflated, feeling defeated, and feeling as though she was incompetent. Let's talk about the top 4 signs that you have a toxic manager. My name is Ricky. I spent years in corporate leadership, and now I am a certified professional coach specializing in leadership and communication, which are the 2 most important soft skills for you to have a career advantage. The first sign that you have a toxic manager is you leave conversations with them more confused than clear. And this happens a lot during one-on-ones or even during performance review discussions, where you might have questions for your manager, or maybe you're stuck in your work and you need some support from your manager. But after leaving your one-on-one, you feel even more confused. And not only that, I had a client that I worked with where she constantly left one-on-ones with her manager feeling deflated, feeling defeated, and feeling as though she was incompetent. And she wasn't quite sure why she kept feeling that until we dove a little bit deeper and talked about what actually went on during those one-on-ones. And what she came to realize as a light bulb moment was that she had a toxic manager. Her manager was constantly talking to her in a condescending tone, but framing it as constructive feedback. The feedback was far from constructive, because when feedback is given constructively, it's supposed to be clear, it's supposed to have an example, and it's also supposed to have a path forward of what good looks like so that it can be avoided. But instead, my client constantly experienced this type of behavior from her manager, where her manager would say, "You should have caught that mistake." Or her manager would say, "Why don't you know this by now?" Or when she would ask a question, her manager would say, "Did you really ask me that question? Did you even think about this?" Those are condescending, toxic behaviors from managers. Those are not constructive feedback. What constructive feedback sounds like is, it's okay that you made this mistake this time. This is a new project that you're working on that you haven't worked on in the past. Let's talk through it together so that next time you can avoid the same mistake. What I would have done in this situation is X, Y, and Z. Sign number 2 that you have a toxic manager is one that I personally experienced myself earlier on in my career, and I didn't really know what was happening. This is when your manager tells you very vague feedback like, "Step it up," or "You need to be more strategic," without ever giving you real examples, even when you ask for it. Remember, when you receive feedback, you have to ask for specific examples. What examples do you have that I behaved in that way? Or when has that type of behavior shown up from me during interactions with you? These are all questions meant to hold your manager accountable, especially if they are framing toxic behavior as feedback to you. Sign number 3 that you have a toxic manager is when you're interested in applying for a job within the same company and your manager blocks it, or your manager is not supportive. That is a sign of insecurity, that is a sign of immaturity, and that is a sign of a toxic manager who wants to maintain control over you because they're used to having that. And so when that type of behavior happens, it's important for you to know that it's not about you, it's about them. It's about how their insecurity might be showing up and they're trying to project it out on you to try to prevent you from growing your own career. Now, of course, there are certain situations where it's right for a manager to not support a promotion or not support you interviewing for a job if you're not ready for that next level, let's say. That only works if the manager actually shows that they have an intention of supporting you and guiding you and coaching you towards developing into the skill sets that are needed for that next level or for that next role. If they are simply just saying, "I don't support you," or they're trying to block you from interviewing for another role within the same company, that is a sign of a toxic manager. The number 4 and my favorite sign of a toxic manager is when you ask questions, they get defensive. That is the most clear sign of a toxic manager, because questions are meant to be asked, especially to your manager. Your manager is supposed to play a role of someone who is more experienced than you and someone who is there to support you and help guide you in getting the work done. If you ask any question about the work, whether it's a question about the deliverable or the timeline or the stakeholders or the audience who is receiving the work that you're doing, if your manager shows signs of defensiveness, that means they are behaving in a toxic way. Now, the reasoning behind their defensiveness can be because 1, they don't know the answer themselves, or 2, and I've seen this behavior a lot in insecure managers who don't want their team members to grow and don't actually intend to help support their team members in their own career development. They get defensive because they don't want you to have as much information than they do, which is a very, very immature and ironic thing. Because as a manager and leader myself, one of my main goals is to make sure that all of my team members have as much access to information and knowledge as they can so that they can perform their best and so that they can be empowered to do their best work. This fourth behavior is the most toxic behavior because if you can't ask questions, what kind of psychological safety is there on the team? If you are shot down with defensiveness every time you ask a question where you are meant to be learning from your manager, of course, then that will create this barrier and that will erode any kind of trust that exists amongst the manager and the team members. If you are dealing with a toxic manager, just know that you are not alone. I myself have experienced my fair share of toxic managers, but I've also experienced my fair share of really, really great, self-aware, empathetic, and highly supportive managers and leaders. So they do exist. The important thing is being aware of this type of behavior and making sure that you don't internalize that as something that is wrong with you in that situation. If you experience any of those 4 behaviors that I mentioned from your manager, chances are they are part of the problem, if not the big problem, and there are ways to navigate through it. If you have any questions about this, feel free to drop them in the comments and I can help address them specifically to your situation, or watch my other videos. I have a 30-day career growth challenge where we talk about how to navigate through difficult career situations just like these. If this resonates with you, or if you're interested in more practical career guidance so that you can be more confident in growing your career, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.